6:14 a.m. May 3, 1962. Harold Dennison was walking his cornfield when he noticed the crust. The soil had hardened into a surface like concrete. He knelt down and tried to break through with his hands. The layer was 3 inches thick. Beneath it, the topsoil had turned to dust. By noon, wind had taken 40 acres. By the end of the week, 60,000 acres across 3 counties had lost an average of 4.7 inches of topsoil. Dennison's farm carried a debt of $18,000. The land was now worth less than $9. The fertilizer combination that caused it had won the Midwest Agricultural Innovation Prize 6 months earlier. The trophy weighed 12 pounds. The chemical ratio that destroyed the soil fit on a label 2 inches wide. Before you click away, do me a favor. If you want to understand how something that won an industry award destroyed more farmland in one season than the Dust Bowl took in some counties over 5 years, and why the people who figured it out were ignored for 8 months while the damage spread, hit subscribe. This story was buried in agricultural extension reports that nobody outside 3 counties ever read. It should not stay there. The product was called Soil Charge Triple Action. Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company introduced it in September 1961. The formulation combined ammonium nitrate, potassium chloride, and a proprietary binding agent Birchwood called Stay Put polymer. The pitch was simple: 1 application in fall, no spring reapplication needed. Nutrients released slowly through winter and spring. Labor cut in half, cost reduced by 38% compared to standard programs. Birchwood sold 4,000 tons in the first 6 weeks. Farmers Cooperative of Eastern Iowa ordered 900 tons. Henderson County Agricultural Supply in Illinois moved 700 tons. Smaller dealers across Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri took the rest. The Midwest Agricultural Innovation Prize came with a plaque, a 12-pound bronze trophy, and a feature in Farm Chemical magazine. The November 1961 article quoted Birchwood's research director, Dr. Raymond Alcott. He said Stay Put polymer was the result of 4 years of controlled trials. He said nutrient retention rates exceeded 92% through a standard Midwest winter. He said application rates were calibrated for clay loam soils with organic matter content between 3 and 6%. The article ran 4 pages. It included photographs of test plots at Birchwood's research station in DeKalb County, Illinois. The corn in those photographs stood 7 feet tall. What the article did not mention was soil structure. What it did not mention was aggregate stability. What it did not mention was what happens when you bind soil particles together chemically and then subject them to freeze-thaw cycles in the absence of adequate organic matter buffering. The first application went on fields in October 1961. By December, the polymer had integrated into the top 4 inches of soil across every field where it had been applied. By March 1962, those fields looked normal. The snow melted, farmers walked their ground, everything seemed fine. Then it dried out. The mechanism was straightforward once anyone looked. The Stay Put polymer formed cross-linked bonds between clay particles. In moist conditions, the bonds remained flexible. As soil moisture dropped below 18%, the polymer hardened. Clay particles locked together. The soil surface formed a continuous crust. Beneath that crust, the soil structure collapsed. Aggregates that normally held soil particles in loose clusters broke down. What remained was dust. The environmental conditions required for catastrophic failure were specific. Soil moisture had to drop below 18%. Wind speed had to exceed 12 miles per hour sustained. The crust had to dry uniformly, which required 3 consecutive days without rain and daytime temperatures above 60 degrees. Those conditions arrived in eastern Iowa on May 2, 1962. They arrived in Henderson County, Illinois on May 4. They arrived in Audrain County, Missouri on May 6. Harold Dennison lost 40 acres before he realized what was happening. His neighbor Robert Kellerman lost 60. Kellerman had applied Soil Charge Triple Action to all 320 acres he farmed. By May 8, he had lost topsoil on 280 of those acres. His farm carried debt of $41,000. The land value dropped from $218 per acre to $97 per acre in the space of 1 week. Kellerman had 3 children. The youngest was 4 years old. He sold the farm to a regional operator for $73,000 in August 1962. After settling debts, he cleared $18,000. He moved to Davenport and worked in a tire factory until he retired in 1987. The pattern appeared simultaneously across the region. On May 5, the Henderson County Extension Office received 11 calls reporting soil crusting. On May 6, they received 43. By May 8, extension offices in 6 counties were reporting the same thing. Fields treated with Soil Charge Triple Action were forming surface crusts. Wind was taking the topsoil underneath. The Soil Conservation Service dispatched soil scientist Dr. Ellen Vaughn on May 9. Vaughn had a doctorate from Iowa State University. She had published 14 papers on soil chemistry. She arrived in Henderson County on May 10 and spent 3 days examining affected fields. She collected soil samples from 68 locations across 4 counties. She interviewed 32 farmers. She examined application records from 7 agricultural supply dealers. Her report was published on May 28, 1962, in a Soil Conservation Service internal memorandum distributed to extension offices in Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri. Vaughn identified the polymer as the primary cause. She documented the mechanism of crust formation. She measured aggregate stability in affected soils and compared it to untreated control fields. Aggregate stability in treated fields averaged 21% of normal. She measured wind erosion rates. Affected fields were losing soil at rates between 4 and 9 tons per acre during wind events exceeding 12 miles per hour. She calculated total topsoil loss across the affected region at 4.2 million tons as of May 25. What Vaughn missed was the application rate interaction. She assumed the problem was uniform across all treated fields. It was not. Farmers who had applied soil charge triple action at the recommended rate of 200 pounds per acre experienced severe crusting. Farmers who had applied it at reduced rates below 150 pounds per acre experienced moderate crusting. Farmers who had applied it at rates above 250 pounds per acre experienced total surface sealing. On those fields, nothing was growing. The crust was impermeable to water. Rain ran off the surface. Seeds could not germinate. Vaughn recommended immediate cessation of soil charge triple action use. She recommended mechanical disruption of crusted surfaces where possible. She recommended cover crop seeding to stabilize remaining topsoil. What she did not recommend was any action against Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company. Her report treated the product as a failed innovation, not as a liability. If you want to understand how a county extension agent with no formal chemistry training figured out what a PhD soil scientist missed, and why it took a windstorm that destroyed 8,000 more acres to force a product recall, keep watching. The detail that broke the case was something Birchwood had published in their own technical literature. Nobody had read it closely enough to see what it meant. The agent was named Peter Cormack. He worked for the University of Illinois Extension Office in Henderson County. Cormack had a bachelor's degree in agronomy from the University of Illinois. He had worked as a county agent for 11 years. His father had farmed 400 acres outside Biggsville, Illinois until his death in 1957. Cormack knew the farmers in his county personally. He had grown up with most of them. On May 12, Cormack received a call from Thomas Whitfield. Whitfield farmed 240 acres. He had applied soil charge triple action to 160 of those acres in October 1961. By May 12, he had visible crusting on all 160 treated acres. Whitfield told Cormack something that Vaughn had not documented. The crusting was worse on his best ground. The fields with the highest organic matter, the fields that produced the best yields, were crusting harder and faster than his marginal ground. That should not have made sense. Organic matter buffers soil chemistry. It prevents rapid changes in soil structure. Fields with high organic matter should have resisted crusting better than fields with low organic matter, but Whitfield's observation was the opposite. Cormack drove to Whitfield's farm that afternoon. He walked both the treated and untreated fields. Whitfield was right. The pattern was backwards. Cormack went back to his office and pulled the soil charge triple action technical literature. Birchwood had published a 20-page application guide. Page 14 included a table of recommended application rates adjusted for soil organic matter content. For soils with organic matter below 3%, the recommended rate was 150 pounds per acre. For soils with organic matter between 3 and 6%, the recommended rate was 200 pounds per acre. For soils with organic matter above 6%, the recommended rate was 250 pounds per acre. The logic was nutrient management. Higher organic matter soils had higher cation exchange capacity. They could hold more nutrients. Birchwood recommended higher application rates to match that capacity. What Birchwood had not tested was what happened when you applied higher concentrations of stay-put polymer to soils that already had better structure. The polymer did not just bind nutrients, it bound soil particles. More polymer meant stronger binding. Stronger binding meant harder crust. Fields with the best natural structure were getting the highest polymer concentrations. They were forming the hardest crusts. Cormack called Vaughn on May 14. He explained what he had found. Vaughn returned to Henderson County on May 16. She resampled fields with documented organic matter levels. She measured crust hardness using a penetrometer. Fields with organic matter above 6% and application rates of 250 pounds per acre had crust hardness averaging 92 pounds per square inch. Fields with organic matter below 3% and application rates of 150 pounds per acre had crust hardness averaging 41 pounds per square inch. The correlation was exact. Higher organic matter plus higher application rates equaled harder crusts and faster topsoil loss. Vaughn published a supplemental report on May 21. She revised her initial findings. She identified the application rate table as the primary source of miscalculation. She recommended that Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company issue an immediate recall and provide remediation support for affected farmers. She sent copies of her report to Birchwood, to the Illinois Department of Agriculture, to the Iowa Department of Agriculture, and to the Missouri Department of Agriculture. Birchwood's response came on May 24. The company issued a statement attributing the soil damage to improper application and adverse weather conditions. The statement noted that Soil Charge Triple Action had been tested extensively under controlled conditions. It noted that the product had received the Midwest Agricultural Innovation Prize. It noted that thousands of acres treated with the product were performing normally. The statement recommended that farmers experiencing crusting should apply supplemental irrigation and avoid working the soil until moisture levels increased. The farmers did not have supplemental irrigation. Most of them were dryland operations. The recommendation was meaningless. On May 27, a windstorm moved through Henderson County with sustained winds of 28 miles per hour. 8,000 additional acres lost topsoil. The dust cloud was visible from Galesburg, Illinois, 18 miles away. A reporter from the Galesburg Register-Mail drove to Henderson County and interviewed farmers. The article ran on May 29. It included photographs of abandoned tractors sitting in fields with no topsoil. It included an interview with Robert Kellerman, who by that point had already decided to sell. The article reached the Illinois state legislature. On June 1, State Representative Donald Harmon called for an investigation of Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company. The Illinois Department of Agriculture opened a formal inquiry on June 4. Birchwood retained legal counsel on June 6. On June 8, the company issued a second statement. This one acknowledged that Soil Charge Triple Action had contributed to soil crusting in some conditions. It offered a voluntary product return program. Farmers who returned unused product would receive full refunds. Farmers who had already applied the product would receive technical support and soil amendment materials at no cost. The offer did not address loss of topsoil. It did not address loss of land value. It did not address farm debt that now exceeded the value of the land securing it. On June 12, a group of 47 farmers from Henderson, Mercer, and Warren counties in Illinois filed a joint lawsuit against Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company seeking damages for soil loss and diminished land value. The lawsuit named total damages at $2.8 million. Birchwood's internal documents, which became available during discovery, showed the company had conducted field trials on 600 acres across 3 locations. All 3 locations were in DeKalb County, Illinois. Soil organic matter at those locations ranged from 2.1 to 3.4%. Birchwood had never field tested Soil Charge Triple Action on soils with organic matter above 4%. The application rate table published in the technical guide was based on laboratory trials, not field performance. The laboratory trials had measured nutrient retention. They had not measured soil structure changes. Birchwood's own chemists had noted in internal reports that stapot polymer formed persistent bonds with clay minerals. One report, dated March 1961, noted that bond strength increased with polymer concentration and with clay content. The report recommended further testing to determine long-term soil structure impacts. That testing had never been conducted. Birchwood brought Soil Charge Triple Action to market 8 months after that recommendation was written. The lawsuit moved slowly through 1962 and into 1963. Birchwood's legal strategy was to argue that soil loss resulted from natural wind erosion exacerbated by drought conditions, not from product failure. The company's attorneys noted that 1962 was a drought year across much of the Midwest. They noted that wind erosion had been reported on untreated fields as well. They argued that Soil Charge Triple Action may have contributed to crusting, but was not the sole cause of topsoil loss. The case turned on one additional death, though not a human one. In April 1963, a farmer named Lawrence Metcalf applied Soil Charge Triple Action to 80 acres of newly purchased land in Warren County, Illinois. Metcalf had not farmed the previous year. He had not heard about the crusting problems. He had purchased surplus Soil Charge Triple Action from a dealer who was liquidating old inventory at a discount. Metcalf applied the product at the recommended rate of 200 pounds per acre based on his soil test showing 5.2% organic matter. By late May 1963, his fields had crusted. By early June, he had lost an average of 6 inches of topsoil across all 80 acres. The land had cost him $32,000. After the topsoil loss, it appraised at $11,000. Metcalf had financed the purchase with a loan from First National Bank of Monmouth. The loan was secured by the land. Metcalf now owed more than twice what the land was worth. On June 18, 1963, Lawrence Metcalf drove to his field, parked his truck, and shot himself. He was 41 years old. He left a wife and 2 daughters. The Monmouth Daily Review published an article about Metcalfe's death on June 20th. The article mentioned Soil Charge Triple Action by name. It mentioned the pending lawsuit. It mentioned that Birchwood had known about crusting problems for more than a year and had not issued a comprehensive recall. The article was picked up by the Associated Press. It ran in newspapers across Illinois, Iowa, and Missouri. On June 24th, Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company announced a full recall of Soil Charge Triple Action and a settlement fund for affected farmers. The settlement terms were finalized in August 1963. Birchwood established a fund of $4.7 million. Farmers who could document topsoil loss attributable to Soil Charge Triple Action were eligible for compensation based on measured soil depth reduction and current land value. The settlement also required Birchwood to fund soil restoration efforts including lime application, organic matter addition, and cover crop seeding on affected acres. The company did not admit liability. The settlement was structured as a voluntary remediation program. By the time claims were processed, 632 farmers across 7 counties had documented topsoil loss totaling 61,800 acres. Average topsoil loss was 5.1 inches. Average compensation per farmer was $7,400. That did not cover the loss. Most farmers had borrowed against land that was now worth half what it had been. The compensation paid down debt. It did not restore the farms. The Midwest Agricultural Innovation Prize Committee revoked Birchwood's award in September 1963. The bronze trophy was returned. The feature article in Farm Chemical magazine was retracted. Dr. Raymond Alcott, Birchwood's research director, resigned in October 1963. He took a position with a chemical company in Ohio. Birchwood Agricultural Chemical Company ceased operations in 1967. The company was sold to a regional farm supply cooperative. The stay-put polymer formulation was never used again. The long-term data on affected fields came from a study conducted by the University of Illinois between 1964 and 1974. Soil scientists tracked recovery on 40 fields that had experienced severe crusting. Even with remediation efforts, topsoil depth on those fields remained an average of 3.8 inches below pre-treatment levels 10 years later. Organic matter content had recovered to within 80% of original levels. Crop yields remained depressed by an average of 14% compared to adjacent untreated land. The study concluded that topsoil loss of the magnitude experienced in 1962 and 1963 would require between 20 and 40 years of active soil building to fully remediate. The principle that destroyed those fields is still relevant. Modern polymer-based soil amendments are widely used, particularly in horticultural and turf applications. The polymers are different. They are designed to swell and contract with moisture rather than forming rigid bonds, but the underlying risk remains the same. Any chemical that alters soil structure has the potential to cause catastrophic failure if applied without understanding the interaction between polymer chemistry, soil mineralogy, and environmental conditions. The United States Department of Agriculture now requires field testing across multiple soil types and climate zones before polymer-based soil amendments can be marketed for agricultural use. Testing protocols specifically require measurement of aggregate stability, water infiltration rates, and surface crust formation under dry conditions. Those protocols were written in 1968. They were written in response to Soil Charge Triple Action. Peter Cormack continued working as a county extension agent in Henderson County until his retirement in 1989. He published 2 papers on soil amendment interactions with soil organic matter. Both papers cited the soil charge case. Cormack died in 2003 at the age of 74. His obituary in the Biggsville Eagle noted his work helping farmers recover from the topsoil loss of 1962. It noted that he had refused multiple job offers from private companies after the case became public. He said he preferred to work for farmers, not for corporations. Dr. Ellen Vaughn went on to a long career with the Soil Conservation Service, later renamed the Natural Resources Conservation Service. She published 62 papers on soil chemistry and soil conservation. She retired in 1991. In a 1988 interview with the Journal of Soil and Water Conservation, she said the soil charge case taught her that laboratory results could not substitute for field observation. She said the most important data often came from farmers, not from instruments. The bronze trophy that Birchwood received for the Midwest Agricultural Innovation Prize is now in the collections of the Smithsonian National Museum of American History. It sits in a storage facility in Suitland, Maryland. The label 2 inches wide that listed the chemical ratio of Soil Charge Triple Action is gone. Nobody kept one. The formulation is documented in court records and in the internal Birchwood documents that became public during discovery. The ratio was 60% ammonium nitrate, 30% potassium chloride, and 10% stay-put polymer by weight. That 10% destroyed 60,000 acres. If you have experience with soil amendments or if your family farmed during this period, I want to hear about it. Drop a comment with your story. Tell me what state you are in. If you know someone who was affected by this, tell me what happened to their farm. These stories are disappearing. The people who lived through this are in their 80s and 90s now. If we do not document what they remember, it is gone. Subscribe if you want to see more of these forgotten agriculture stories. There are dozens of them, and most people have never heard what actually happened.